Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make Chelsea buns. These are a nice dough, a sort of an enriched bread dough, which is rolled out into a rectangle and then is covered with a little bit of butter, some dried mixed fruits and a little bit of cinnamon as well, and some sugar, and then rolled up, cut into 12 pieces and then baked in a pan. And then you can brush the top with some apricot jam, and if you want to you can put some icing on the top as well. So it takes a bit of time because we have to prove the dough and such like, and there are quite a few steps involved, but it's worth doing because they do taste very good, and it's also a good way to use up dried fruits that you have left over after your Christmas baking. So you could actually use cherries if you've got cherries left over, or cranberries, or whatever you've got. I'm using the sultanas, raisins, currants and mixed peel that form the basis of a packet of dried fruit in the UK anyway. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for the dough I have 500 grams, which is 2 1/3 cups of bread flour. That's based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup. I have 1 teaspoon of salt. I have 7 grams, which is 1 packet of instant yeast. I have 1 medium egg, that would be large in the USA, and I have 40 grams of butter, which is slightly under 3 tablespoons, and that's unsalted butter. I also have 300 milliliters, 1 1/4 cups of milk, and I'm going to put the butter and the milk into a saucepan because I'm going to heat those until they're lukewarm and the butter has melted. And I'll actually just start that process now. You don't need to see that happening. So that's the ingredients for the dough, and then for the filling I have my 300 grams of dried mixed fruit, which I soaked for a couple of hours, and I'm draining that now. You don't have to soak it, but I prefer to do that. And that 300 grams works out at about 2 1/4 cups. Then I have 75 grams, 6 tablespoons of light brown sugar. I have 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. I have the zest from 1 orange. I have 28 grams, 2 tablespoons of butter, and again, when I need that I will have melted it. And then for the top I have some apricot jam, and I'm going to warm that up and add a little bit of water with it, and I'll only need about a tablespoon or so of that, with a little bit of water to brush over the top. Then I have 2 tablespoons of orange juice, and I won't need all of that, but 2 tablespoons is more than enough to mix into 120 grams, 1 cup of icing sugar. That will form the icing for drizzling on the top for those who might want to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is to start to mix the dough as soon as my milk and my butter are lukewarm. So I'm going to put the flour and the salt into my stand mixer. You can do this by hand, but kneading it takes a lot more work than just putting it in the stand mixer. So I've mixed the salt into the flour, and then I'm going to sprinkle my yeast over the top like that. And so with my butter and milk melted together, and the temperature has reached about 40 degrees Celsius, which I think is about between 108 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to pour that into the flour, and I'm going to add my egg in as well. And I'm simply going to use my dough hook in a minute to knead that, but I'm going to start off with my beater. And that very quickly pulls everything together. So I'm going to scrape that off the paddle attachment, and I'm going to then knead that with my dough hook. So I will knead that for probably 5 or 6 minutes until the dough comes together and it's nice and smooth and elastic. So that has been kneading for 5 minutes and it's nice and elastic now. So I'm going to take that out and put it into a greased bowl to allow it to prove. So I'm simply going to pull that dough over on itself like that, and I'm going to form it into a ball. And then I'm going to put that into a lightly greased bowl. I'm going to put it in face down, top down, and then turn it over so that the grease coats the ball so that it doesn't form a skin. And then I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap and I'm going to leave that in a warm place for it to proof until it has doubled in size. That may take an hour, it may take longer, but once it's doubled in size I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step. So it's been just over an hour and my dough has now more than doubled in size. So what I've done is I've floured my work surface and I'm going to tip the dough out onto it. And I want to just pat it down to knock the air out. And I want to get this into a rectangle of about 16 inches by 12 inches, which is just under 38 centimetres by 30 centimetres. And it doesn't have to be exact. So that's actually just about good enough. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my melted butter and I'm going to brush that over like that. And I'm going to just sort of sprinkle over the zest from the orange, and I'm going to mix the cinnamon into the sugar. And I'm going to sprinkle that over as well. And then I'm going to put the fruit over as well. With that over, what I'm going to do is take this long side and I'm going to fold it over on itself a little bit like that, and then I'm going to roll it as tightly as I can into a large log, encasing all the fruit. So I have my 38 or 39 centimeters there, and I want to cut this into 12, which means cutting it into pieces which are about 1¼ inches, 4½ centimeters wide. But I want 12 pieces, and so I'll take the halfway mark there, and then cut each of these into 3 pieces. And with that cut into 12 pieces, I'm going to put it into a greased pan, and I'm going to put it with the cut side facing up, and I'm going to cover that again with plastic wrap, and I've left a little gap between them a little bit, because as they rise they should start to join together again. And I'm going to put that into a warm place for about 30 to 45 minutes, until they've risen up a little bit. And as that time comes to an end, I'm going to preheat my oven to 190 Celsius. That's 170 Celsius with the fan, 375 Fahrenheit. And these will then be ready to go into the oven and bake. So I'll come back when my oven is preheated and we'll put them in the oven. It's been just over 30 minutes and I have my oven preheated, and the Chelsea buns with the fruit in the dough have risen and joined up. So I'm going to put those into the oven now, and I'm going to bake them for between 20 and 25 minutes until they've risen up and they've baked through. If they look to be browning too quickly on the top, I will put some aluminium foil over them just to stop the browning process a little bit. But after they've baked for 20 to 25 minutes and I can see that they're baked through, I will take them out, allow them to cool a little bit, and then tip them out onto a rack to cool completely. Then I'll come back and we'll put the apricot glaze on and some icing. I baked the Chelsea buns for 25 minutes. I took them out of the oven and I left them for about 3 minutes. Then I turned them out onto a wire rack, and this is what they look like. And so what I have here is some apricot jam, which I have just warmed up slightly, and I'm going to brush over the surface. So that's got some apricot jam glaze all over. So the next thing I'm going to do is just to make a quick icing, and for that I'm going to put about a tablespoon of that orange juice into the icing sugar and stir it around, and I will add more liquid if I need it, so that I get a thick icing which will drip off the spoon as I drizzle it over the top of the Chelsea buns. So I'll need a little bit more, I think. And that's about the consistency that I want. So I'm going to just drizzle some of that over the buns. It doesn't have to be neat. So I've drizzled some icing over, and I'm just going to leave those and let them cool down completely. And then once they've cooled down and the icing has firmed up a little bit, I'll come back and we'll have a taste. So I left the Chelsea buns after I iced them so that that icing could firm up just a little bit. And it's now time to have a taste. So as you can see, the dough is cooked very, very nicely. And I'll just have a bite into this one. It tastes wonderful, of that Christmassy mixed fruit. And then the icing on the top gives it that extra little bit of sweetness as well. These are very, very good. I had a thought as well that if you have some spare mincemeat, if you bought mincemeat to make mince pies and you have some left over that you don't know what to do with, you could potentially roll this dough out, and instead of putting the dried fruit on, spread some mincemeat over it and then roll them up and bake them like that. It would be very, very good. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.